Hi, Sarah. Do you think we've got most people are here?
Yeah, a few people are coming in, so I don't know if you want to leave it just
yeah, I can make a start. I can't tell people can come in. It is an informal session, so that'd be great. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Hope you can all hear me. My name is Kate Morton. In my day job, I'm the Chief Exec of Bath Mind. We're a local mental health charity. I think some of you know me and may know of the charity. We're a mental health provider, but I'm also the chair of the Bath and North East Somerset Third Sector Group 3SG. We are working really in collaboration with Bath North East Somerset Council to produce and welcome you to some informal discussions and question and answer sessions on a Let's Talk, which I think is a really exciting development with Baines Council. And it's really between us and you as residents and interested parties of Baines. We really want to keep it informal and really have sort of a really rich conversation today about kind of the issues and topics that are concerning everybody. We have a couple of themes today, which we'll talk about in a minute. And on the panel today, apart from myself, will be chairing the session. We have Mandy Bishop, who is Chief Operating Officer for Bath and North East Somerset Council. We have Christine Storey, who is the Procurement and Commissioning Manager for Sustainability for Baines Council. And Miles Lloyd, some of you will know, is our Project Manager for Baines 3SG. Now, I just want to give you some breaking news before I hand you over to Mandy. Some of you will know that James Carlin, our current 3SG director, has left us. We have appointed Becky Brooks, who starts with us on Monday. And if we do hold another one of these, I'd like to bring Becky onto the panel and welcome you all. So that would be really nice to do. I'm going to hand you over to Mandy before we start the session. Thanks, Mandy.
Thank you, Kate. I just wanted to say a huge thank you for your time today. Kate and I and Sarah and Dave had a conversation following a session that I know some of you attended a few months ago, where we talked about the winter pressures and what was going on across Bath and North East Somerset and the council, and some of sort of the budget challenges that we faced. And it was a really fantastic interactive session where we got some really good information, some quite unique intelligence and views back compared to a lot of the other forums that we'd undertaken. And Kate and I reflected on this and just felt that we wanted to keep those conversations going. Some of the issues that came up during those conversations were actually quite different, aside from the winter pressures and budgets. And we thought we would run some of these Let's Talk discussions really on a sort of semi-regular basis, just to really get your views, hopefully give you some information that's helpful for you. But secondly, to get your views and feedback, so particularly the council staff, that we can listen to you and understand what your thoughts are and how we move forward and how we work with our communities in a sort of really positive way, so that we're actually almost ahead of the game with you and understand what the issues are for you. We've got some sort of ideas, haven't we, Kate, where we think topics that might be quite interesting. So one we were talking about was customer services, and really like to get your thoughts and views around face-to-face contact, be digital in the future. And I think that would be a session that would be really good just to work through with the community and the groups within the community.
Oh, Mandy, we've lost you.
Am I back?
Yeah, back.
Got a message. Yes, I think I got muted inadvertently then, but I'm back in the room. So like I said, today Kate's just going to go through today the couple of sessions that we've got in more detail. So Miles will take you through, as I said today, the survey from the voluntary sector and what's the outcomes of that. And then Chrissy will just talk about some of the procurement opportunities for us. We don't see these as our sessions, they're your sessions. So please use the chat. We are recording it. If anybody's got a problem with that, if you could let Sarah know, that would be great. But without further ado, I'm going to pass back to Kate to introduce Miles for the first session, and I'll be keeping an eye on the chat as well. So please do comment, and like I said, hopefully we could get your views and thoughts, and if there's anything you want to know about in the future.
Great. Thank you, Mandy, and thank everyone. Yes, and I should say as well, thank you very much for your time today. It is really appreciated. It is a very, very busy time for us all at the moment, isn't it? I will introduce you to Miles. I just want to say as well at the end, there will be that time for questions and discussions. It is informal, as Mandy says, it is very much your session. And we'd really welcome some future topic ideas as well, so we can keep these going. We're thinking quarterly, that may work, but we're going to obviously look at a programme and think about how best to model this in the future. So your thoughts and ideas will be very much appreciated. Okay, I'm going to hand you over to Miles Lloyd. Miles is, as I say, project manager for Bain's 3SG, and we've recently carried out the state of the third sector survey, really about where we think we are at the moment, what the kind of key issues are for the third sector or the voluntary and community sector going forward, and how we can address some of the kind of real key issues for us and how we address some of those. So Miles, are you available? Are you there?
Yeah. Hi, Kate. I'm
here.
Hi.
Hi. I'll go on mute and I'll leave it over to you. Is that okay? You able to share your screen?
Yeah, I'll share my screen now. Thanks, Kate, for the introduction.
Thanks, Miles.
That's all right. And yeah, great to see so many familiar faces on the call. And sorry to not be showing my video today. I'm sort of just recovering from an illness, so I'm not in the best, not looking my best today. So excuse me for that, but hopefully the presentation will be looking a little bit better. Right, so hopefully everyone can see that. Just pop a message in the chat or something if you can't. But yeah, essentially some of you will have already known. I can see that there's a lot of organizations on here that have sort of been part of our journey for a long time now. And as you know, that there's a lot of transition going on with 3SG, with James, our director, having left at the end of last week, and then Becky Brooks starting next week. So there are certain things which will sort of are on pause at the moment. But in terms of the third sector survey report and some of the things we've done as a result of that, I'm happy to sort of give you an update on that. And if you've got any questions or anything like that, then feel free to sort of get in touch with us. I've put all of the details on the slides, and I believe Sarah and the team will send around the slides to you at the end of the session. So yeah, and it's all recorded, so don't worry about sort of taking notes frantically or anything like that. So basically at the end of last year, as we do every year now, is we conducted our third sector survey across Bath and North East Somerset, and we had a total of 97 organisations responded, which was amazing, and we're really grateful to everyone that conducted that, because it really does shape the way in which we work for that year and really ensure that we're meeting the needs of local third sector organisations. For those of you that might not be sure what third sector means, essentially that incorporates community groups, charities, social enterprises, and sort of anything in between that, really, churches. So it is a very broad term. And at 3SG, we've got a network of over 180 third sector organisations now. And if you want to find out more about that and how you can be part of that network, then feel free to get in touch or head onto our website, and it's very easy to get involved. So some of the real key figures that came out from the survey, as you can see on here, was that 90% of organisations were worried about long-term funding. There was a lot of talk about sort of immediate funding that came as a result of the pandemic. However, those funding streams aren't necessarily longer term, and so there's been a big concern that we've heard both sort of informally at our events and speaking to members, as well as in this survey itself, around that topic. We've also found that organisations are really concerned around staff wellbeing, and I'll show you some more stats around that a little bit later, as well as going back to sort of the new income, the income. 77% of organisations are forced to seek new income streams, and there's a graph which is really quite telling about that. And any of you that have been involved in the sort of fundraising side of your organisation will I'm sure be able to agree that there's been a huge shift for many of you in terms of how you find new income streams, particularly with events not being able to run as they once were, and a lot of disruption still around that. And one of the other big stats, which I know I've had a lot of conversations with organisations and individuals about, is difficulty recruiting volunteers. And actually in recent times, I'd actually add sort of difficulty recruiting staff as well to this one, because that's something that's really come to light. And we do advertise job vacancies on our website continuously throughout the year, and that's something which has really increased. And I know that there's a big problem in the sector, both locally and nationally, around sort of recruitment. So that's something that we're trying to support with where we can. If you do want to view the full report, then you can click on the link down there or follow that link, and we have got a press release that has all of the details of the report. But I'll just take you through some of the sort of key highlights from it. So in terms of those levels of concern on current issues, some of the biggest ones were, like we said before, staff wellbeing and long-term funding were two of the real key ones for us. In fact, changes to working patterns was, out of all of them, one of the most positive responses and findings from the survey. Actually, the changes to working patterns as a result of the pandemic seems to not be a major concern as with those other topics that we talked about. And also volunteer retention doesn't seem to be as big an issue as it once was, but certainly the volunteer recruitment still seems to be increasing in terms of a problem. And then the viability of current service, that links back to that sort of funding stream and the long-term funding of that. So a lot of people might have been employed to, particularly in the third sector, to sort of fill roles which were resulting to the response to the pandemic, and that need hasn't gone away. But potentially those funding streams that were there for the pandemic might not be still existing. So here were some key quotes. I won't read them all out, but we sort of picked a few quotes that were sort of representative of how many of you felt. And I think one of the biggest things to come across from this and from some of the future events that we've run is actually the feeling that you're not alone in this, and many organizations being able to share that learning. And we've held various events, maybe not on a specific topic such as kind of viability of current service or volunteer recruitment, but actually some of the events that we have run has enabled some of those key issues to be talked about, and organizations can relate and not feel like it's just them that are going through these challenges. So some of the other stats that we came across. So on a more positive, like collaboration was something that has really grown and increased as a result of the pandemic. And we found that, pretty much all organizations view collaboration as a positive, with 3% unsure. And this is obviously something that is at the heart of what 3SG does and why we exist, is really to be that conduit, that glue between the third sector, and allow for that knowledge and sharing of information, as well as organizations are really looking at the year ahead and wanting to collaborate more. So that's where we can really step in and support. So if you're not sure about sort of, if you're just starting up as an organization, or you've been, I know there's some organizations that are on the call today that we've sort of spoken about, and they might have been around for 10, 20 years, but actually they sort of changed the way they're working and seen the pandemic as a way to actually collaborate more. Or even though organizations that have been sort of working internationally and are now taking more of a local focus, then please do get in touch, and we can talk about ways in which we can help get you connected with other organizations within the local area. But yeah, some of the big things, we did a little Wordle out of all of we took all of the responses, or qualitative data from the third sector survey, and essentially these four here on the left hand side, those were the biggest terms that continuously came up. So funding, as often you find in the sector, was one of the biggest pressures on the sector, but also recruitment and staff is another key concern. So I'll talk at the end just a little bit about sort of how we're here to support and what ways we can help to tackle this issue. Some of these issues are bigger than sort of one organization. They're a sector-wide issue, but we're constantly sort of open to feedback and want to deliver the best that we can and respond to your needs. So please do let us know if there's ways in which we can do this. And you'll have seen that we're sort of continuously running events with other organizations, so we're always up for doing that as well. So if you can see a certain area in which you think an organization that could support with that, or you as an organization could potentially step in and help others, whether it be with shared learning or whether it be a particular course or training, then do get in touch, and we'd be happy to look to collaborate with you on that. So just looking into the funding a little bit more. So yeah, grants and trust was a massive increase. So 69% of organisations sought new income via grants and trusts, and that was pretty huge, particularly compared to years before. And I'll show you on the last slide the difference between the 2020 survey results and the 2021. But also this really comes back to the fact that community events haven't been able to take place. The fundraising there hasn't been able to take place during the pandemic, and so hopefully, fingers crossed, we will see a big change in this in the year ahead with everything easing. But yeah, in terms of ways in which we can support you with the grants and trusts and finding new income streams, that's something which we've got various different resources. One of which is the Baines bulletin. So you've got the Interagency Bulletin, which I'll let Sarah and Dave explain that a little bit more detail, because they're the masterminds behind that, along with Alison and their team. But yeah, they've got a really good funding journal which you can access. We've also got some other resources such as Funds Online, which I'll talk about shortly. But yeah, it's essentially there's a lot kind of breaking down a lot of the other sort of usual income streams for sort of individual community fundraising, philanthropy and trading. And philanthropy is something which a lot of organisations aren't really aware about or don't necessarily look into that much. And trading is another one which we've actually been running some workshops and courses on recently about, and looking at sort of diversifying your income stream, particularly as that sort of social enterprise model is becoming more and more adopted by many charities. And that's sort of where our events can be a really good opportunity to get that shared learning from other organisations that sort of taken that leap and started doing that, because it really has paid off for some. So this is just a final bit of data. I'm sorry for sort of the heaviness on the data side, but yeah, essentially this is a bit of a comparison between our third sector survey results in 2020 compared to 2021. So some of the big kind of differences were that recruiting volunteers, so that was a 10% increase of challenge in terms of recruiting volunteers, and another real massive increase was organisations at peak capacity or over. So we're sort of continually seeing that kind of increase in organisations that are struggling, and that all sort of ties back to sort of the staff shortages and the volunteer recruitment as well. So I'll just take you through some of the ways in which we're offering support, and also can sort of open the floor as well at the end to, if anybody does want to sort of get in touch or let us know some ways in which they think we can support, then do let us know. But essentially jobs advertising, I mentioned it before, that's something that we have been doing on our site, and we offer £20 per job advertising for members. So 3SG members, if you pay an annual income, you pay an annual membership fee based on your annual income. So if you're a really small community group and you have a less than £10,000 annual income, then it's free to be a 3SG member, and then it just goes up progressively with sort of small increments depending on your annual income as an organisation. But yeah, we offer very cheap job advertising, and we put that on our social media, our website, and that's actually been getting a huge amount of visits at the moment, which is really positive. And it's a #1 visited site on our website. So that's, we're trying to, as much as possible, reach as many different audiences as we can and really help you with that staff recruitment, because we know it's a big area of need at the moment. 3SG community newsletter, this is something which we've actually just launched in the last couple of months. So many of you might know that we were involved with the pandemic response, and we had overall over 3,000 volunteers that signed up, whether it be food and medication deliveries, or whether it be with the vaccination centre at Bath Racecourse, or helping with the pavilion. And so essentially with all of those volunteers, we didn't want to lose this volunteer momentum. And so we've been working with the community volunteer service, as well as keeping in contact with the the volunteers of past that have been involved with us, and we set up a 3SG community newsletter, and this goes out once a month at the end of the month, and essentially contains a variety of information. So it sort of contains news, events, job opportunities, so those job opportunities that I mentioned before in the third sector, as well as volunteering opportunities locally. So we directly link to volunteering opportunities that are available on the Baines Community Volunteer Service, and we pick a handful from there, a variety of different opportunities. So if you haven't already heard of it, please do make sure to check out the Community Volunteer Service. And this is actually something which is a much broader issue in terms of sort of volunteer support for organisations, and it's something that we've been working with the Community Volunteer Service as well as St Mungo's, who are currently the provider of sort of volunteer training and support for organisations. So we are conducting a report that's looking at the volunteering landscape in Baines, and we're actually going to be presenting the findings of that at the Charity Expo. So it's actually called the Business Exchange Charity Conference, that we partnered up with the Business Exchange with to deliver, and all of the details for that is on our website, and we've got a slot where we'll be talking about the findings of the volunteering survey, the volunteering report, looking at both how organisations, sort of the issues that organisations are having when it comes to recruiting volunteers, retaining volunteers and managing them, as well as looking at actually the volunteering journey and the individual in terms of getting into volunteering, and some of the issues that have arisen as a result of COVID, and just the new forms of volunteering that have sort of emerged. So that's another thing which do check out our events page. The other things just to mention are that we've got loads of free workshops, courses and networking events. So I talked a lot about funding as some of the key issues. So a lot of our workshops have been very heavily focused on funding and support in which you can get for that. So we've brought in Lime Green Consultancy, which have been running these day courses that I know some of you have signed up to and attended, and they're really well received, and we're going to be running plenty more of them because they're so popular. But we'd really recommend you coming along to them, and it's on topics such as developing a fundraising strategy, getting started with fundraising, or winning grants from trusts and foundations. And we do also with online events as well. We do also have an events archive. So when you go onto the members page on the 3SG website, you can view an events archive, and if they're online events, then you'll be able to see the recording of them. But a lot of our events have actually been in person, because we realize that there's a lot of benefit with the sort of knowledge sharing and in-person, that in-person experience, which many people have been lacking over the last couple of years, really. Final few things. So we've got networks and groups that we set up. So we've got the fundraising network, which we run with Bath Fundraisers Group. And that's another place which is a really good place to sort of share resources and knowledge around the best practices for fundraising and diversifying those income streams. And we run that bi-monthly. So if you check out our events page, then you'll be able to see when the next one is coming up. You can also sign up to their bulletin. We will be doing one-to-one support again. So this is something that James used to do on a regular basis. However, we are in a transition period at the moment, so we'll let you know once we sort of get that back up and running. 3SG newsletter, of course, make sure to sign up to that if you don't get it already. So that's our weekly newsletter that we send around, which has various different, that's really aimed at third sector organisations and individuals in the sector. So that's different from the community newsletter, which is going out to all of those volunteers and any individuals or residents that wish to receive it. The 3SG newsletter is very much focused on the third sector organisations and those working within the third sector. And then we've also got the members page, which is just, for all of our 3SG members, anyone can create a profile, and you can have access to Funds Online, which is like a massive library of over 8,000 funders, which would normally cost your organisation about over £1,000 to have access to, but we are offering that out for free because we've got a license. So please do make use of that. And then you can see the events archive, a community venue directory, as well as our newsletter archive. So yeah, sorry for there's a lot to try and cover in a short period of time, but hopefully that gives you a little brief introduction. And yeah, any questions, please do get in touch with us on the details below. And yeah, we'll send around the slides.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Miles. That is a really comprehensive as I galloped through, but that was really detailed on where we're at the moment. Do we want to have some just some brief questions on the presentation before we bring Christine in? Has anybody got any questions? Are they putting them in the chat? No questions? Okay. Are you sharing your slide still, Miles? No.
No, I don't think so. I think that's all.
No, I can just see you. Okay.
Thanks for all the comments in the chat as well, putting the links and everything.
Thank you so much, Miles, for stepping in, particularly when you're not very well. So I think you need to go. I mean that politely. And all right, thank you so much. And we'll keep kind of those messages coming in, and just keep putting any queries in the chat, and we can pick those up afterwards. And I know that Sarah and Dave are probably picking those up as well, which is fantastic. I'd like to now hand over to Christine Storey, who is a procurement and commissioning manager for sustainability for Baines Council. And Christine, I believe you're going to give an overview on procurement intentions. Oh, lost you. There you go.
Am I here? Am I still here?
You are, you're there. The joy of teams, eh?
That's great, isn't it? Right. I'm going to give an overview of actually where we are on our procurement strategy, because I think that kind of puts quite a lot of stuff into context. And then just briefly around the commissioning's intentions, which we kind of just changed its name to something else, and what's coming up in procurement going forward in terms of kind of what's happened with when we're part of the EU and stuff like that. So procurement always sounds dry. My apologies for this. We cannot get away from it. So I'm going to try my best not to make it dry, hence the sort of lime green background on most of it. Yeah, so I'm Chrissy Storey. I'm one of the procurement commission managers in the strategic procurement team in Baines. My focus is really around sustainability, and that's not just the green element. It's around social, economic, and environmental issues within procurement. I've been doing it for quite a while elsewhere, so I've just been working with Baines the last year and a bit before that as well. I'm going to quickly touch on in kind of, they all link together, just kind of how we do this. So kind of look at our strategy, which came in last year, which is very different for the council, how we worked before, which is kind of why I'm going to focus on that, I think, to a certain extent. What comes up in terms of priorities and themes, the contract pipeline, which was called commissioning intentions, which actually didn't make that much sense. Supply in the Southwest, which is our portal, and then looking at any future procurement changes for procurement. And the reason really for bringing this up here is that there's going to be, if you've been involved in any procurement before, in the next 18 months, there will be quite a shift in how procurement is done and what the focus is from what we're being asked to do in terms of kind of process and focusing on various elements of it. I'll explain what PPN 0521 is as well. That was just to remind me, actually. So yeah, I hope that's all okay. So I'm going to start with our procurement and commissioning strategy, which got adopted last September. It was done in response to the climate emergency commitment that the council had made, and that declaration. Its original title was actually the Climate Emergency Procurement Strategy. We kind of moved away from that because it's wider than that, but it does have a strap line of think climate, think local, think innovation. So trying to get a lot of different things into procurement at the moment. We have a number of themes, all sitting within the corporate priorities and procurement rules. So obviously from the corporate strategy, our priorities are looking at that climate emergency response and also giving people a bigger say. And then our procurement rules are the national, and there were the EU ones, but now the national ones, which have kind of the follow on from Brexit and waiting for new ones to come through, but also our internal ones, which allows us a bit more flexibility, particularly for lower level contracts, so our contract standing orders. So what I say here, it'll be within those two parameters. So the strategy has a number of themes. There's 6 there, isn't there? And I'll focus on 3 of them in a bit more detail, but starting kind of about 4 o'clock, I suppose. Transparent supply chains. One of the issues we have at the moment is the kind of opaqueness and opacity of our supply chains. And that's really been evidenced by kind of events in the last 2 to 3 years, not only from COVID, but also conflict and Brexit to a certain extent as well. So kind of what can we do within our procurement to have more overview of those supply chains? And a lot of that's actually kind of relocalizing a lot of it as well. Linked to that is modern slavery. That's quite a big one. We have mandatory standards to meet on that one, as do businesses over a certain value. And whilst we think actually modern slavery, maybe we do, maybe we don't, for a procurement point of view, something like a cleaning contract is considered a high risk one, so how labour is being treated within that. And those two are obviously linked quite closely. For things like IT, hardware, we've signed up with an NGO to have more transparency on that. I'll come back to local economy in a moment. And then greater engagement, part of what our strategy is about, and actually what the corporate strategy is about, is actually that greater engagement to getting people on board. You know, the Baines strapline is improving people's lives, and I think sometimes from a procurement point of view, we think, well, that's just kind of residents, but actually it's the business people's lives as well within Baines, and how we can have greater engagement with those. And personally, from a procurement point of view, I'm always conscious that procurement people do procurement and they're very good at it, but sometimes we have to be talking, or not sometimes, all the time, we have to be talking to our supply markets as well to actually understand what's going on there and with them, but also kind of the gaps we're missing as well. So just focusing on three really in a bit more detail. So carbon net zero is a commitment that the council have made, that not only the council, but also the county will be net zero by 2030. Each time I say this, it gets closer and closer. It's only 7.5 years away. It's not long. So we have to be doing something about it now. And the one thing the council has a lot of control is its spend. So we spend about 200 million a year. Some of that can be made to work harder and work better and work smarter, particularly around carbon net zero, but also other stuff as well, but particularly around the carbon element of it as well. We're about to start sorry, I had my microphone on. We're about to start a process of actually measuring what's called our scope 3 emissions. So the emissions that are embedded in what we buy and what we use. Primarily, and that's really what's done through procurement. We're just starting that in the kind of next week. But obviously, part of the carbon net zero, we can't do it by ourselves. We need to include our suppliers in that one. And also linking back to the greater engagement, if we can't explain to our suppliers what we want to do with our carbon net zero, then actually how can we expect them to help us and help themselves in that one as well? So very much around that kind of sort of linking together of that and how we can work with that. We can't do it by ourselves. It does affect actually everybody. What happens if we don't get that 2030? I don't know, but we certainly need to be trying to get there on that one. And our procurement is one of the ways of doing that. Social value. So social value, as you all know, particularly in this group, I suspect, more than any other group I talked to, it's been around for almost 10 years now. And it's going great guns. And when I mentioned the new procurement rules, and I'll go through them in more detail, that is very much the focus of how the new procurement way is going to work. They're talking about a lot more added value, which basically is summing up as social value. So we have a policy at the moment, which is mainly around targeted recruitment and training and working with SMEs. It's only really used in big contracts, but all we need to do is get a new policy that's applicable across the board. So I'm working on that with a group of people at the moment, kind of early stages of drafting that one. Clearly, a policy is only as good as it's implemented. So we will be looking at how that can be done, the best way of doing it, and what works for who. So definitely kind of scaling demand and how we want to, not demand, but kind of how we put that into contracts and up and down the scale, and evaluating it. And then, of course, the one thing we have to do is looking at measuring and monitoring that. If we can't measure it, then actually we're not sure what we're doing. We could be doing better or worse than we think we are. Various ways of doing that. Obviously, Social Value Portal is one of them, but we're also looking at a couple of other systems at the moment, which can give us better qualitative data than something like the Social Value Portal. So kind of exploring those issues at the moment, but again, very much within the procurement way of looking at things. And then the last one on this is think local and local economy. So obviously as an authority, we have our sort of local economic team, sort of base to support. The last procurement strategy was entitled Think Local, where contracts up to, I think it was 50,000 procurers were expected to look at that kind of using local suppliers first. Our strategy said we'd update that. We have, so we've updated the threshold to 100,000, which in principle sounds absolutely lovely and great for everybody. But the slight stumbling block we have, and this is where kind of suppliers can help us on this one as potential suppliers, is the visibility of the business community, where we can contact them and see if people are interested. If we don't know who's out there and we can't contact them, it's quite difficult to then get them involved in a kind of procurement or quote process.
We're looking at different ways of doing this, potentially setting up a database, perhaps on a West of England wide basis. So we can have a look at that, because obviously across West of England, we're all kind of using similar suppliers. Internally, there's a couple of things we can do as well. But it's that is part of the kind of a slight slumming block around think local. But if we can help on that would be great. And I will come to a kind of, when we come to the supplier portal, I'll kind of mention it again then, because that kind of ties very much closely into that. The one thing we're always asked about when we talk about local is what is local. So local under the EU regulations was almost a forbidden word, because local meant the entirety of the EU, which wasn't very helpful at all. So in terms of what we can do now, and particularly below the higher threshold contracts, we're looking at local as being BANES as the core, clearly, because that's the local authority area we're sitting in. Then kind of moving out slightly to the next level of local as West of England, because again, that makes sense to us as well. The Southwest, that's where we sit, and then looking towards the Western Gateway, so which is the economic initiative running from Wiltshire across to South, kind of Swansea and South Wales that way. Obviously, there's lots of overlaps, but really, as kind of when we're talking about local, it is kind of that kind of ripple effect out to a certain extent. But obviously, for part of this, local is the BANES area. I'm loath to put a mileage on it in any way, shape, or form, because that kind of doesn't quite make sense either, as to where organisations are. So the strategy objectives, because there's 4 of them, and I'll run through them, because again, it's all kind of, we can't achieve any of this by ourselves. Kind of both sides of any sort of arrangement needs to be involved. So the first one is considering the carbon footprint and sustainability impacts of all products and services bought by the council over their lifetime. As I mentioned to start with, this was originally a climate emergency procurement strategy, so hence it is kind of quite carbon heavy, but we're kind of moving away from that, but also looking at sustainability as well, so also the economic and the social ones as well. I say we're starting to do some carbon emission reporting at the moment, and kind of that project's going on. But what you might see if you're involved in any kind of council arrangement is that even for the kind of grant agreements, we'll be looking to put more sustainability elements into that and how we can measure that as well. So we can drive that forward and take kind of the market with us. See, oh, sorry, wrong button. Then secondly, obviously, as I keep mentioning, we need suppliers and potential suppliers to kind of work with us as well on this one. Also very conscious that particularly SMEs, I think to a certain extent, where resources may be less, and kind of, when I'm talking about SMEs, I'm also talking about third sector organizations as well, how their capacity and capability can help really because it is there to help. You know, some people are so focused on delivering a service that sometimes they're kind of looking at this, the sustainability side can go a bit pushed to the side slightly. I'm very conscious of that, because small businesses that have very, very limited resources. So again, part of what we're doing is actually going to hopefully look at that. And I think some of the support that Miles said from the 3SG, I made a note to myself, actually, can we team up with you guys to see what else can be done around that? There are some really good support packages in terms of this from people like the FSB and the Growth Hub at WECA. But I think specifically around the sector, that might be really useful to join up with 3SG on that one. In fact, we can follow that up later, and it'd be a really useful and good thing to do. And this one, I think, will have the biggest impact around in terms of kind of how we start looking at procurement. So within the strategy, we've put in the encouraging innovation by looking at needs and getting outcomes. And this is looking at our internal processes, going, how can we move from output specifications to outcome specifications, and so people can come up with more innovative solutions. And really, because a lot of the time, public authorities, they move quite slowly. We're also very conscious that small organizations are quite agile, they can move quite fast, and they're doing a lot better than us, and they have a lot more innovative ideas on how something can be delivered. So very much trying to open up that type of approach to procurement, and something that comes up in the new procurement regs will actually hopefully help us with that one as well. So again, there'll be more sort of opportunity for dialogue and discussion. And then finally, and this really links just straight back to the Think Local part of the strategy wheel I mentioned earlier, looking at using local suppliers, not only for carbon footprint, but also to help develop and maintain a strong local economy. So they're pretty dry in their own right, but actually there's a lot of work to be done around that, and a lot of things to be brought together to really make this a really sort of strong and dedicated approach. One thing that we obviously did consultation on the strategy, both internally and externally, before it went out, was really kind of what sort of approach to take. The one plea we had back across the board is please make it tiered, please make it proportionate for the size of spend. And that's what we will be doing. So obviously major projects have their own targets, and around sustainability and environmental and carbon and social and recruitment and that side of it tend to be standalone, doesn't drive much behavior change. The broader the base of this particular triangle, hopefully will drive through greater behavior change. So smaller contracts where it's not possibly quite so onerous will hopefully kind of drive that through. So if somebody's doing something every day, it doesn't become oh my crikey heavens, we've got to do something different. It's actually, that's what we do every day, and that kind of filters through and filters down, getting to hopefully a really good cumulative impact, which will be measured through some of the social value measurement tools, hence going that route down that one. So that's the strategy, and the reason I've spent quite time on that one, because I think it sets the direction of travel around our procurement and what we're doing, and kind of the change from, right, we're just going to let this, we're not going to talk to suppliers, we're not going to do this, we have to do it that way, and all the rest of it, and do a much more kind of holistic approach, but very much also tying into kind of corporate strategies as well. Local authority strategies and public sector don't always tie up together, but what we're trying to do is actually clearly make them work together. And as part of that, you need to know about, or not you need to know, but it's useful to know about our procurement portal. And some of you will have come across this before. Confusingly, sometimes it's called ProContract, and that's kind of, I think, in some of the information that's gone out, it's called ProContract. That's our internal name from it. It's sometimes called Practice because that's the software suppliers who provide it. The public-facing sort of title for it is Supplying the Southwest, with the so the web link is supplyingthesouthwest.org.uk. And the reason why it's not sort of doesn't have a dedicated Baines front page is that the majority of local authorities in the Southwest, I think bar 2, actually use this particular portal and under this branding. So if you register on it, not only can you access Baines opportunities, but you can also access other local authorities opportunities as well, if that's what's wanted. Otherwise, you can limit yourself when you register it. If you do register, you can get alerts to what's coming up. And again, particularly useful because everything over 5K really from Baines should go through this portal. I'm not saying it always does, but it should go through the portal, where that's a request for quote or all the way up to full tenders. Registering is a little clunky, although on that particular sort of bit of blurb from there, it says an intuitive process. It's not the most intuitive process in the world, but again, we haven't come across a procurement portal that is. So from that point of view, it's not bad. If you log on, register, log on and work your way through it, then you can kind of have a look at that and kind of get yourself set up if you haven't before. But it's quite a useful way of us being able to have information of who's out there and who might be available to, if we're asking for quotes and stuff like that. So going back to my point a while ago about saying we don't know who's out there all the time, this is one way of actually getting us to visibility of that. It holds a contract register, so hold that thought in mind. I'll explain that in a second. And also, if you just want to see what opportunities are on there, you can do that without registering as well. I think there's a little button on the top one, and you can filter by area and by type as well. So Supplying the Southwest is the title for the external facing one, but don't be confused if we would refer to it as ProContract as well. We are about to have someone in our team whose sole post 3 days a week will be working on the portal to get training material up together, to try and refine some of the stuff, particularly on the lower level opportunities. And I'm very much hoping in the next few months there will be a kind of training and guidance for suppliers coming out on this, in which case we're happy to do sessions around that or provide guidance on that way as well. So hopefully by probably autumn-ish, we should have that in place. Contracts pipeline. So the contracts pipeline is the new name for the commissioning intentions. And really because the commissioning intentions document is a spreadsheet-based document of contracts that are due to be let in the next 12 to 24 months. really over a certain value, but actually shouldn't involve most of them. And it's a mixture of relets, which have been taken from the contracts register. And I said, hold that thought in the contracts register. This is brought through into the contracts pipeline. So it gives, when they're going to relet, the kind of value, who's in charge and that side of it, but also new requirements as well. So something that might be a brand new opportunity that's coming up should be on there as well. It's pretty comprehensive. We've done a lot of work in the last 6 months, but again, like everything, it's not perfect because new stuff does come up as and when. It will be a live document. At some stage, we will have a legal requirement to publish it publicly. That was supposed to be as of April. The government have just moved that date as part of their transforming procurement. However, we have new web pages for procurement going live on our website tomorrow, and it will be on that. And when the presentation gets sent around, it will have that website on it as well. So, but it is on there, so it's worth having a look at, and you should be, I think you should be able to filter and kind of have a look from there. And that will be kept up to date as much as we possibly can. So it is going to be live, but it is a range of contracts, all from quite small up to some fairly big one-offs. But yeah, definitely worth having a look at as to what's coming up in the next few months, if that's of any interest. And just for interest generally, I think seeing what the council spends, I think on the various things is always quite interesting. Some of them can be quite random. So, and then my last little section is around kind of moving on for the new procurement rules. So as I mentioned before, we're still under the kind of the fallout from Brexit, that kind of the in-betweeny bit from EU rules to kind of EU not for the UK rules at the moment. The government brought out a green paper on transforming public procurement rules back in 2020 and 2021. There is responded to it last year with a very detailed response on how the new rules are going to look, pretty much going to look. We're waiting for that bill to go through Parliament, which we're very much hoping will be soon, because we're kind of waiting this for a while. Obviously, because of the extent of it, it'll take a while to go through. And once it's been passed and got its royal assent, there'll be then 6 months to implementation. And the reason for the 6 months to implementation is because there are some quite fundamental changes in there, and the government are actually providing a lot of training, which is brilliant. They don't always when they change things, but this time they've decided they will provide from light touch all the way through down to kind of very, very detailed training for super users and stuff like that. So, and what we get from that, we will hopefully putting out to kind of suppliers as well. So it's not just us being trained, but also the other side will get the same information. And PPN, so Procurement Policy Note 0521, is the National Procurement Policy Statement, which again, I'll provide a link for. It's the direction of travel for procurement, and very much around looking at how social value should be embedded into procurement, rather than looking at just kind of cost and a bit of social value. If you're interested in this sort of stuff, it's worth having a look at, because it does start to give an indication of where procurement's going to go. So the main key changes, with the ones in purple are probably the main ones for this actually, but all the rules have been moved into one framework. There's about 4 or 5 at the moment. New procedures, I'll quickly rush those to the second. The one that's really going to sort of hit is this moving to a broader view of value and social value and added value. At the moment, we're supposed to evaluate tenders on the most economically advantageous tender, obviously known as MEAT. The economically has been taken out of it, so it'll be the most advantageous tender. So local authorities will be able to look at a broader view of value, something up until now we haven't really been able to do. But it should be, it will transform some of the contracts and stuff that go through. There should be a single supplier database owned by the Cabinet Office. One of the things from particularly SMEs and smaller organisations in the third sector is that once they tender, every time they tender, they have to provide exactly the same information in terms of company information. The single supplier database should take that need out, in that if we're asking information, someone like Bristol, if we're also tendering for Bristol, they can just pick it up from that debate database. The onus will be on the supplier to keep that up to date, but actually it should reduce the burden hugely. They're changing the rules to late payment, so if you're subcontracting, that makes a difference if you don't get paid from the main prime authority. Light touch will remain, so that the kind of really social care, people and services, the higher value, which you might have been involved in before, that's going to remain. But also a greater focus on KPI, key performance indicators monitoring and reporting, which we haven't had before, which will make a difference to the visibility and transparency of how procurement works. And then finally on this, really, I've mentioned 3 new processes. The flexible competitive procedure links back into what I was talking about in now looking at the different ways of our doing procurement in terms of outcomes and innovation. We didn't know about this when we drafted that particular part of our strategy, so clearly everyone's thinking on the same lines, but it should allow more freedom to negotiate and innovate, which again links back into the ability to added value. And the government are hoping that to be the standard way of doing procurement, which will be interesting at the beginning, to say the least. And then the open, which is the same one as now, and then limited tender, which is under extreme urgency, but the flexible competitive hopefully will make a massive difference to procurement, both from a procurer's point of view, but also from a supplier's point of view as well, whether that's from a small contract all the way up to big contracts as well. A lot more openness and flexibility. So yes, I think I've probably covered those. So the strategy, the themes, pipeline, supply in the Southwest, and future procurement changes. Any questions, pop them in the chat, or I'm always available afterwards by email. And then, so yeah, that is my email address if anyone wants to email me afterwards. I haven't left the website blank deliberately, or sorry, forgetfully. It is deliberate. I will put the link on before Sarah sends us out with the new procurement pages coming up coming up tomorrow. They've been revamped. They are, I think, a whole lot more useful than they were before. So have a look at those, explain in a lot more detail. So thank you. So I did a rush through. Sorry about that. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Chrissy. That's brilliant. So you're able to stop sharing your screen.
Yep, finding my mouse.
Lovely. Thank you so much. That was great. Real detailed run through of the procurement intentions and the strategy. That was brilliant. Have you got time just for any quick questions? I think we've got a bit of time. If anyone has anything burning they want to ask Chrissy at this stage. Queries about the presentation or about the work that Chrissy and her team are doing? You've stunned them into silence. Oh, Ben. Hi.
Hi, sorry about that. Thank you so much. Really useful presentation. I was wondering, with some of the bigger contracts where there are subcontracted suppliers, will the ambitions around keeping it local stand for those subcontracts as well within the contract? I mean, obviously there will be some sort of umbrella provision, but I'm thinking of the bigger six-figure contracts and how you will sort of keep an eye on that, or whether that's all contained within the contract frameworks.
A lot of that, I think, it will be probably through the social value clauses within those contracts, where there will be a requirement on prime providers to use local authorities, local businesses where possible. Clearly, when we're putting stuff out and information out in supplier sessions for those bigger contracts, that will be hopefully put out there going, actually, we have a requirement to look at local and how we can do with that one as well. But yeah, we can build that into various things.
Thanks, Ben. Chrissy, I've got a question from Simon Lawson about flexible tendering. Can you say a bit more about that?
What's the question? Hold on a second, I missed it. Flexible tender, what that last?
I'm not sure, Simon, what that is in relation to. I'm assuming it's something you mentioned in the strategy.
Yes, it was one of the new options coming in. I was just wondering if you could say, what's the circumstances you use flexible tendering, and what's flexibility mean?
The information we had from the response on the consultation was very much that particular process, they want to use it as the default process. So instead of automatically going to something like an open process or a closed or a sort of two-stage process, they want that to be the first one. So opening up how procurement is done, not quite so rigid, not quite so prescriptive. Clearly, it'll be down to, as I understand it, down to kind of how an authority will work on that one. But really sort of open that up for better negotiation to come through, rather than going, this is just what we want. Actually going out to suppliers, going, actually, what can you offer? And within sort of a looser specification. But if we wait for more detail, I think with that, it's dripping through. but I can also I can dig some more stuff about that and give it to Sarah to send out as well, if that helps.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Simon.
Will
Thanks,
do.
Chrissy. Chris, there's a question from Sarah James about social value measuring, and is something that Bain's going to take on.
We will be raising social value.
Yeah.
We're looking at the best way of doing it. So the new policy that's being developed along with Sarah and a couple of others will look at how we're going to measure that. Clearly, one of the easiest ways, not the easiest, but the kind of one of the ways it's becoming most straightforward at the moment is using the social value portal TOMS. I'm not convinced that's the way forward, because it's you can't, they're limited in the kind of qualitative stuff you can get through, and sometimes that's a bigger story in actually the measurement. So yes, it will be being measured. So we're just trying to work out the best way and the best route to do that. Yep.
That's really helpful. And just to say, Chrissy, that we're doing some work on social return on investment. So perhaps we can link up with that as well.
Happy to do that. Yeah,
that would be quite useful.
I've been
and
involved
I know
with that
there was a query earlier about the Decarbonisation Workshop that we held last week at 3SG. And I think that's something that would be really good to link up with you and this work as well. So we'll do that offline. Just to reassure colleagues on the call, we'll be doing that. We'll pick this up.
Fantastic. Great.
Cool. Any other questions, comments? That's been a really helpful session. I know that when Mandy and I have been talking about these sessions, we very much want these to continue in an informal conversation on question and answer style. I apologise, I haven't been keeping an eye on the chat. I know, Sarah, you have been, and some ideas for future topics. It would be really great to hear your views either now, or you can email us directly after this session, because I think we'd like to continue with these, as I said at the beginning, maybe quarterly, excuse me. And I think it would be really helpful if you can very much steer the sorts of topics that you're particularly interested in hearing, so we can really organise and plan those sessions accordingly. Didn't know if you wanted to add anything on that, Mandy.
Yeah, I was just going to add a couple of things, actually. Thinking about social value, I'm just thinking of the data sets we hold, Chrissy, that might be useful for the voluntary sector. I was thinking, you know, we've got some really good data on things like physical activity return on investment, and rather than trying to support the sector as well, if you're bidding for projects with small pots of money as well, perhaps, Chrissy, that's something we could think about as well. Yep. Just thinking about how we do that across the organisation and pull some of our own business intelligence together to almost stop you having to repeat that work. So I think we'll take that away as an action. Looking at the chat, Kate, there's a couple of areas that have come up: the recruiting volunteers and recruitment of staff. So perhaps something around the whole sort of how you recruit in a, you know, when the council, like everybody else, is really struggling for to fill some of our roles, particularly some roles that aren't full time, that are potentially temporary as well. So I think the whole sort of staffing and recruitment issue, we'll have a think about that. And there were some very positive messages back about the decarbonising workshop as well. So we'll pick those up, and I think Joshua's got his hand up.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Josh.
Hi, Kate. Nice to see you. Hang on, I'm off because I was eating my lunch. In terms of recruiting volunteers, I delivered some recruiting volunteer training for the Royal Life Saving Society a couple of weeks ago, so I have slides on that. If anyone ever wants me to deliver them at a session, I'm happy to do stuff. At the same time, I don't want to make the assumption most of you don't know what you're doing, because I know that you're all great, and I've got lots of ideas from lots of different organisations when I wrote the slides, but that's there if there's demand for it.
Thanks, Josh. That's really helpful. Maybe if you include your details to Sarah, she's probably got them. That would be good. We can kind of link that up. That would be really helpful. And I agree, Mandy. I think when we did the third sector survey, not only did the volunteer recruitment and support and retention was really highlighted, the paid staff issue, the challenges there was huge. And I don't think it wasn't because we weren't reflecting it. It's just something that we heard in the qualitative bit of the survey rather than the results that Miles showed everybody earlier. So I'm thinking that might be something that we want to focus on in the future. And we know post-pandemic, that's been a real challenge, hasn't it? Okay, great. Was there anything else anybody wanted to raise, have comments on? This is very much your session for discussion. Okay, half an hour back of your time. I think I want to really thank everybody today. Thank you, Mandy, Chrissy, Miles, obviously Sarah and Dave for ever pulling this together. And thank you all for your time today. I hope you've found it useful. I certainly have, and I do think holding these fairly regularly would be a real benefit. But we will have a think about some of the topics. We'll go through your suggestions and questions in the chat and pick some of those key issues out, and organise something for maybe in 3 months' time. That feels good. Is that okay? Any last minutes? No. All right. Get back to your lunch.
Everyone.
Thank you.
So much for your time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.